Alright, so for this one, okay, you want to remember whenever you're dividing, you want to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the complex conjugate of the denominator. Numerator and denominator. The complex conjugate of the denominator. So we'll clean that up a little bit. Okay, so that means negative I and positive I are complex conjugates. And that's that whole 0 minus I and 0 plus I. Okay, so negative 1 plus 9I over negative I, you're going to multiply that by I over I. Okay, now this one you're going to just distribute. So I times negative 1 is negative I times 9I is plus 9I squared. Okay. This one just gives you negative I times I, which is negative I squared. Okay, so that equals negative I, of course, I squared is negative 1. And that applies for both. So plus 9 times negative 1 over negative 1. Okay, so we end up with, moving that up a little bit, negative I minus 9 over 1, which becomes negative I minus 9. Or to put it in the right form, negative 9 minus I. All right, any questions on this one? All right. Okay. Okay, and the last thing we're going to go over, the operations involving powers of I. Excuse me. Okay, so the one thing we want to notice is that we know that I equals square root of negative 1. Okay, and we figured out that I squared equals negative 1. Okay, but what about I to the third power? Then that's actually just going to equal I squared times I. I squared times I to the first gives you I to the third power. Okay, so we know I squared is negative 1. So you have negative I. So what about I to the fourth power? That's just going to equal I squared times I squared, which is -1 times -1, which is just 1. Okay. So what if we started up here and go for I to the fifth power? I to the fifth power, we can rewrite that as I to the fourth power times I. I to the fourth power, we already figured out that was just 1. That's just 1 times I. And we know I is square root of -1. Okay, so what about I to the sixth power? That's just I to the fourth power times I squared. Okay, so we know I to the fourth is 1. And I squared is -1. Okay, so that's just going to equal -1. Okay, so I to the seventh power, we can rewrite that as I to the fourth power times I to the third power. Okay, I to the fourth power, we already know that's 1. I to the third power, we already figured that out as -I. So that's just -I. And I to the eighth power, that's just I to the fourth times I to the fourth. We know I to the fourth is 1, so that's just 1 times 1, which is just 1. So if we went through I to the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, you'd have that same pattern over and over and over again. Okay. So knowing we have that same pattern, I guess you could say a cycle of 4, we're going to figure out how to find those high-level powers of I. Okay. So to not really solve, you're more simplifying. To simplify, powers of I, the first thing you want to do is you want to divide that exponent by 4. Okay. Then after you do that, you're going to rewrite the exponent. Instead of being an exponent of n, you're going to rewrite it as 4 times some number k, plus whatever your remainder is. Okay. Now when you do that, your actual 4k, because remember, I to the 4 times anything is just going to give you 1. Here, 4 to the first gave you 1. 4 times 2 gives you 1. 4 times 3 will give you 1. 4 times, so no matter what number you multiply times 4, that exponent is going to give you 1. Okay, so once you do that, your remainder, and 3, since I to the 4k equals 1, use your remainder to simplify. Okay. And if you did it right, your remainder should be either 1, 2, or 3. Or even 0. Alright, oh, anyone's still writing. right, so let's say, for example, let's say if we wanted to simplify I to the 29th power. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is divide 29 by 4. 29 divided by 4. 4 goes into 29 7 times. 4 times 7 is 28. Which leaves you a remainder of 1. So that means, I think that was the second step, that 29, we can make that 4 times 7 plus 1, which is just our remainder. Okay, so all we do is multiply these two together and add your remainder. Okay, that's the second step. Always forget which step is which. Nope, that's still the first step. Rewriting it is the second step. Okay, now your second step is I to the 29th power will now become I to the 4, I guess you say 4 times 7 times I to the first power, or just I. Okay, now if you think about it this way, I to the 4 times 7, that's just I to the 4th power times 7 times I. Okay, so we know I to the 4th power is 1, so that just becomes 1 to the 7th power times I. And 1 to any power is just going to be 1. So you have 1 times I, which is just I. Okay, so I to the 29th power is just equal to I. All right, any questions on that one? Okay. Nope, I'll leave that up for a few more seconds. Okay. Oddly enough, I've had people on exams try to actually go I and count each one 4 by 4 and do it that way. It works for numbers like this. It'll take you a minute, but it'll work. But it's not as effective when it gets a little bit higher. Okay, so what if we wanted to simplify? Uh-oh, am I going through pencil leads like crazy? What if you want to simplify I to the 131st power? Okay, so that's when that counting through it doesn't work as well. Okay, so your first step is you're going to divide that by 4. Okay, so you have 131 divided by 4. Okay, so 4 goes into 13 3 times. 4 times 3 is 12. We subtract. Bring down the 1. 4 goes into 11 twice. 4 times 2 is 8. Subtract, and we end up with a remainder of 3. Okay, so that means that 131, clean that up a little bit. Is equal to 32 times 4, or 4 times 32, doesn't matter. I'll switch them around just to stay consistent. 4 times 32 plus 3, plus a remainder. Now for your second step, I to the 131st power is actually equal to I to the 4 times 32 power times I to the third. Okay, so if we add all of our exponents together, we'll end up with 131. Okay. So we wanted to, we could rewrite this one as I to the 4th power, raise that to the 32nd power, times I to the third. Okay. So we know I to the 4th is equal to 1. So that gives us 1 to the 32nd power times I to the third. And we know 1 to the any power is just going to be 1. That's 1 times I to the third, which is just I to the third. And we figured out earlier that I to the third is just negative I. Let's clean that up some. Okay, so that means I to the 131st power actually simplifies to negative I. Oh, sorry about that. All right, so any questions on that one? All right. Ooh. Can't leave. He wants to leave that up for a few more seconds. All right. Okay, so do one more example, and I'll let you start on that for a minute. Say you want to simplify I to the, where's a good one? I to the 46th power. All right, I'll let you start on that one. Right. Okay. So first step, you're going to divide your exponent by 4. 4 goes into 4 once. 4 times 4 is 4. Go ahead and subtract. We get our 0. Down 6. 4 goes into 6 one time. 4 times 1 is 4. Go ahead and subtract. Leave us with a remainder of 2. Okay, so we know that 46 is equal to 4 times 11 plus 2. So now we can just go ahead and rewrite it. I to the 46th power will equal I to the 4 times 11 times I squared. Okay, so we know that this is just going to equal 1, but going through the steps, I to the 4th raised to the 11th power times I squared just gives us 1 to the 11th power. Since we know that I to the 4th is equal to 1. Times I squared. And like I said, 1 to the any power is just going to be 1. So we end up with 1 times I squared, which is just I squared. We know that I squared is negative 1. Okay, so I to the 46th power simplifies to just be negative 1. All right, so any questions on that one? All right, and that's it for today.